Hello, everybody, and welcome to this very special edition of a Seismic Breakfast Briefing, where we are going to be talking about cultivating impact and improving sustainability in the food and drink sector. I hope you are all sitting comfortably. We'll be getting going in the next 3 or 4 minutes to let all our guests arrive. So in the meantime, don't hesitate to go grab a tea or coffee and make sure you are sitting comfortably. If I've not met you before, it's a pleasure to meet you. My name is Olivia, and I am a sustainability consultant at Seismic, and I will be your host for today's session. During today's session, we'd love to get to know you and hear your questions, and I know our speakers will love to hear your questions as well. So as we wait for everyone to join us, please could you introduce yourself in the chat, which you can find at the bottom right of your screen. I'd love to know, what's your name? Where are you joining us from today? And most importantly, what did you have for breakfast? This morning, I had a classic British staple, which was Marmite on toast, sometimes controversial, but it was really, really tasty. So I'd love to hear from you. Pop your name in the chat in the bottom right hand of your screen. What's your name? Where are you joining us from today? And what did you have for breakfast? Whilst you're typing in your little introduction, I'll take this opportunity to let you know that the session will be recorded today and a copy will be sent to you after the webinar. We're just waiting a few moments to let everyone arrive and get settled before diving in. It's going to be a really brilliant session, so do take the opportunity to get comfy. Hi, we're starting to get some comments in. Thank you, Gillian from Wickmansworth. Welcome. Tea with Shreddies. Great start to the day. Hi, Yuval. Lovely to have you coming from Palermo, Sicily. I hope it's a bit warmer than here in the UK. Coffee so far. Liam has also not had breakfast yet. Oh my goodness, I hope this food and drink session doesn't make you too hungry. Good morning, Danielle. Lovely to have you joining us from Leeds. Julia, wonderfully to have you from Brussels. Eric from Singapore, fantastic. And Eric, you're having dinner. Gosh, lovely to have you from all around the world. We've got Christos from Sweden, Louise, Diana, Jackie, Camille, Cora, another Danielle, Bethan, Darian, Diana, Andres and Paul. Lovely to have you join us. We've got some great options. Jude had Marmite on toast with peanut butter, which begs the question, was that both on the same slice or did you have two different there? I've never mixed it with peanut butter. Not sure how that would go. And good morning, Daniel from Rome Business School. Solia as well. Lovely to have you with us. Great. Keep those comments coming. It's lovely to see everyone that's with us, and I think it's a great sign of the conversations we're going to have together today on a really, really important topic, which is discussing the key social and environmental impacts and opportunities that face the food and drink sector today. Now we're a few minutes in. I think it's about time we get started. So let me share with you what the key takeaways are that you can expect from today's session. So firstly, we hope that you will come away with clarity on the drivers for prioritizing impact. What are the reasons that social and environmental impact needs to be prioritized in the food and drink industry? Also, we will cover where to focus impact in the sector based on some in-depth research. And finally, how to take concrete action based on Seismic's experience and some real-life examples from 3 speakers that we're lucky enough to have with us today. So let me talk you through the agenda. We're talking about the global food system today and businesses' role in it. It's a unique opportunity to hear directly from Amy Bourbeau, our Chief Impact Officer and founder at Seismic, on trends in the global food system, how we can influence the change that is needed, and which specific topics require the most attention. It's also a unique chance to understand the challenges and opportunities in the sector in a digestible way, no pun intended. And also to hear from our brilliant guest speakers from Blacklock, Lily's Kitchen, and the Jamie Oliver Group to pick their brains on their lived experience of driving change. At the end of the session, we will have an audience Q&A, which is one of my favourite parts of a seismic briefing, because we want to hear your questions and put them to our speakers. So my ask of you is to put your questions in the chat as they percolate in your mind throughout the session. And our team behind the scenes will be collecting those questions so that we can ask as many of them as possible to our speakers at the end of the session. So put your questions in the chat and please keep them coming. We can't wait to put them to our speakers and start some great conversations. Now I'm going to tell you briefly a little bit about Seismic. At Seismic, we are sustainability partners driving lasting environmental and social change across all areas of business. We bring together world-leading reporting and disclosure, communications, net zero and B Corp experts to help businesses to lead the shift. Here is a sample of businesses which we have been very fortunate to work with in order to help them reach their sustainability ambitions. You'll see on this slide there's a wide range of sizes and sectors, and a lot of organisations that we've worked with are in the food and drink sector. We've supported just under 200 businesses in total at Seismic. And we feel immensely proud of and committed to every single business that we work with. And one of my favourite parts of my work at Seismic is events like this, bringing together all of those in our community and those who are new to Seismic to hear firsthand from your peers about how you have taken action in your organisation and learn from others about how they've taken action in theirs, so that we can share lessons and collectively improve impact in the food and drink sector. So as I mentioned, for those nearly 200 organisations that we've had the privilege of supporting, we help across a variety of areas to accelerate sustainability and ESG progress. Some of these include ESG strategy to help optimise your performance, reporting and disclosure, helping organisations leverage the B Corp framework, build a road to net zero carbon emissions, and applying a purpose-driven lens and deep impact knowledge to providing high-quality sustainability communications. So now you know a little bit about Seismic, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Amy Bourbeau. She is one of our co-founders and the Chief Impact Officer in the team, and has experience helping hundreds of businesses to increase their force for good in the world. She was also a fundamental player in the start of the B Corp movement here in the UK, working with B Lab. Amy is one of the most experienced people in the world when it comes to using the framework of B Corp to help companies strategically measure and increase their impact. Amy heads up our food and drink practice here at Seismic and has applied her particular specialist expertise in the food and drink industry to a wide range of well-known brands. To name a few, it includes Innocent Drinks, Tony's Chocolonely, and Lily's Kitchen. Thank you so much for being with us here today, Amy, and over to you.
Thank you, Olivia. That's very kind. Lovely to be here this morning talking about food and drink, which is an industry I'm incredibly passionate about. I have had the pleasure of working in and around this industry all my life. My family are from the food and drink world, and it's something that I just think is incredibly important and special. Food and drink, I think, is just the universal kind of experience, as it says here, and it's something that is a kind of a great unifier. Obviously, if we are lucky enough, we all eat food every day. It's an opportunity for us to sit down, take time, hopefully be with loved ones. And if you think about it, food and drink brands and restaurants and those organizations who feed us are companies that, you know, have a very intimate relationship with the consumer, and actually individuals put a huge amount of trust into food and drink companies every day. They invite them into their home, they feed them to their loved ones, they spend their time and money to go and have a treat at a restaurant. It's a big responsibility as a food and drink brand to literally be nourishing individuals and helping them to like live. You know, this is a big deal. So I think it's important that food and drink brands then really kind of step up to this responsibility and earn the trust of those consumers, and also, you know, manage the bad as well as the good, because while there's a huge amount of positive impact that food and drink industries can brands can have, it is also quite a significant contributor to some of the negative impacts that we see both environmentally and societally. To that point, there are, sorry, just changing the slides. Almost a third of global emissions come from the food system. That is a huge amount, obviously. That's just from eating and drinking. That's not from doing anything crazy like taking private jet flights or anything like that. It's just from eating and drinking, which we all do all the time. So there's you know, a lot of risk here to manage. And that's just thinking about the carbon impact, but there's also a huge amount of impact in other areas. If you think about the social risk of supply chains, if you think about the plastics and the packaging and everything else that goes along with it, you know, degradation of biodiversity, water intensiveness, so many things out there. And today, you know, we've only got a bit of time this morning, so I'm not going to go into all of the different ways that the food and drink industry creates impact, but we've picked out a few kind of key areas to focus on, and we'll dive into them and also discuss them with our wonderful panel. Before we do that, I'm going to kind of get into a little bit around what are some of the drivers and the reasons why, apart from, you know, the moral obligation and it being the right thing to do, what are some of the reasons why it might be important to prioritize kind of sustainable growth from the point of view of the food and drink industry. As I jump into this, just a reminder, feel free to pop your questions in the chat. We will have time with the wonderful panel after this to discuss your questions from the audience. So please do share as and if things come up for you. So one of the first things to highlight here is the regulatory requirements. If we look at the landscape at the moment, there are a rapidly increasing amount of regulatory requirements coming in. Now, these are tending to be relevant for larger companies first, but there is going to be a trickle-down effect where starts with the larger organizations and starts coming in thick and fast for medium and smaller organizations as well. So these are things like the CSRD in the EU and the UK SRS. These are meaning that companies are going to have to have a legal requirement to report on their social and environmental impact. And obviously you want to be in a good place to be able to have something positive to report on. And if you're not measuring things, you can't report on them. So it's really important to just kind of start out by getting a good understanding of how you behave and what your performance is and where you have gaps that you need to be filling in. Also, for anyone that's interested in B Corp and the B Corp certification, whether you are thinking about certifying, whether you're already certified, or whether you are one of the 300,000 companies around the world who are using the framework to measure their impact, the B Corp standard is evolving as well and is stepping up in its rigor. So there are going to be a lot, you know, kind of deeper expectations of companies coming up over time, and you want to be ready for that. The next is also, speaking about regulation, there are increasing amounts of kind of increasing standards and requirements around greenwashing and the way that we communicate our impact. So there's the Green Claims Directive in the in the EU, and in the UK, the Advertising Standards Agency has been increasingly evolving their requirements on what you can and can't say. And this means that we have to be really well informed and intentional and mindful about the claims that we are making in regards to, whether we're talking about slightly vague things like eco-friendly, which really means nothing, or whether we're talking about specific claims like net zero or carbon neutral, which have had, there's been evolutions in what you have to be doing to back up that statement. And so even if you've actually not changed anything about how you perform, because the standards are changing, you could have existing language and claims out there. But because the standard has changed, it was okay for you to say that at one point. Now it's not okay. So you've got to be super on it and mindful in not only how you're performing, but how you're talking about how you're performing. Linked to that, obviously, very closely is the reputational risk piece. So consumers are becoming a lot more aware, a lot more savvy. Actually, 39% of consumers in the UK now know what B Corp is, which is a huge increase if we look at the amount of time it's been present here in the UK and how consumers have seen it and recognized it before. And we know that 86% of UK adults want to see more transparency from business on environmental impact, on initiatives, things like that. And they're becoming more savvy. So they're going to be holding you to account, and your reputation is really at risk here if you're either saying the wrong things, or if you're not saying anything, or if you don't have much to say. Then we've got a really practical point, which is around supply chain disruptions. Unfortunately, the impacts of climate change are meaning that supply chains are being massively disruptive. Actually, it's not only the environmental side of things, it's also the social side of things from kind of socio-political point of views. There are a lot of different threats to supply chains. And we know that actually 48% of UK businesses have already been impacted by the physical effects of climate change, and 40% of those, that's been supply chain issues. So when we go to the supermarkets and there's none of our food available to buy, it's not a coincidence. It's because of the impacts of climate change and extreme temperatures and weather events and socio-political events, things like that. So obviously, if we keep on contributing to the problem and the problem keeps getting worse, it's going to be harder for us to buy the ingredients that we need to put into our food, to sell our products, etc. So it's really a kind of a cyclical issue, and something that we all need to be aware of and responsible for. Then on maybe some of the more positive side of things, what are the things that are kind of like pulling us towards wanting to perform better and have higher standards of social and environmental performance? Well, first of all, we've got the thing around expanding your customer base. So as you said, obviously, consumers are wanting to see more transparency from brands. And also we are kind of in the midst of going through one of the kind of biggest generational wealth shifts in history. So by 2030, millennials and Gen Zs will have surpassed boomers for the kind of buying power, $68 trillion of wealth transfer. And we know that Gen Z and millennials shop with sustainability in mind. Actually, 45% of them do, as compared to only 14% of baby boomers. So it is something that we know that consumers are going to be kind of putting their money where their values are, and you want to be able to be part of the group that is appealing to those values and that kind of spending power. We've then got as well thinking about internally in your organization, how you attract and retain talent. And just like millennials and Gen Zs, and not only those generations, by the way, other generations as well, but just like they want to buy from responsible business, they want to work for them as well. 85% of millennials want to work with a company whose values reflect their own. And it's not only about kind of attracting talent initially, but also we know that 56% of employees are more inclined to stay with a company if they have a strong sustainability record. And that's reflected actually by some stats from the UK B Corp community, which show that UK B Corps have an attrition rate of only 8% as compared to the national average of between 16 to 20%. So that obviously not only is great for building a positive culture and a strong, stable workforce, it's also great from a monetary point of view. You're saving a lot of money on the cost of attrition of employees. To that point, thinking about reductions in operational costs. So from the point of view of reducing the amount of attrition, but also thinking about, waste reduction. A lot of sustainability is really just about efficiency and efficiency and avoiding waste and performing better and having stronger operations. So all of those type of things can lead to reduced operational costs, which therefore obviously is better for your bottom line. And to that point, on a financial point of view, not only are you reducing your spend, oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes reducing your spend, but you're also having increased commercial benefits. And that's a combination of the piece around attracting more employees. It's a piece around reducing your operational costs. It's also attracting investors. Investors want to invest in purpose-driven businesses. But yeah, we know that kind of companies who prioritize ESG have much better growth from a revenue point of view and a headcount point of view than those who don't. And again, in the UK, we saw 26% turnover growth between 2017 and 2022 for UK B Corps as compared to the national average of 5%. So this is kind of backed up with performance, and it's something that kind of all these things feed into. So it's a bit of a no-brainer, to be honest, to kind of prioritize sustainable growth. Now, the question is, how do you do that? And what are the areas that you need to look at? And of course, this is dependent on exactly what your business is and what area you focus on. It's going to be slightly different if you are in the hospitality sector versus if you make a product. And if you make a product, what are the ingredients that go into it? And is it long life or short life or all of these things? So there's no kind of one size fits all, but there's a few kind of key areas that it's really important for you to kind of consider and think about kind of taking action in and being informed on. So what we're going to focus on today, and like I said before, there's so many other things that we could also dive into, thinking about nutrition or meat alternatives or responsible consumption, things like that. But today we're going to focus on these 4 areas, which are plastics and packaging, regenerative agriculture, which is a super exciting space at the moment, food waste, which each of our panelists today are taking some great action on food waste. So it'll be wonderful to hear from them about that. And also influencing consumers, how you use that position of trust that I mentioned before to really, use that platform for good and influence your consumers and their behavior. So starting out with plastics and packaging, I think it's no surprise that this is an issue, but some of the stats around this are really shocking, even when you know that this is a serious problem. So there's 1.8 billion tons of carbon emissions annually from plastic production, use, and disposal. That equates to about 5% of global emissions. And that's just plastics, not the other types of packaging, not the other aspects of the food and drink industry. And again, it's not only about carbon, but it's also thinking about the fossil fuel usage, the water usage, the then pollution of the waste when it inevitably ends up in back to our earth and like this, the threat to biodiversity that goes along with that. Also human health risks. We all have plastic in our blood right now. How gross is that? It's very scary. And I think that, there is a narrative that recycling is a solution. It's okay to use plastic because it will be recycled, but actually it's incredibly depressing. Only 9% of all plastic that's ever been made has been recycled. So that is kind of sobering when we think about, recycling being a solution. It's not that great of a solution. And also, to the point earlier around regulation, actually, there are recent EU and UK bans on certain types of single-use plastics. So again, not only from the point of view of it being the right thing to do to drive change, there are going to be some requirements for certain organizations to change and reduce and take a kind of alternate route in this area. And I think, it's important to think about these things in an innovative lens. There are a lot of alternatives out there. It can be hard to find alternatives at scale, but it is doable. There's great initiatives out there. There's a plastic-free initiative, which I would recommend you kind of learning more about and getting involved in to see what alternatives are out there. Also kind of coalitions coming together with other companies who have similar problems. For example, in the B Corp community, there is a plastics and packaging working group where companies can come together and say, we all have the same shared challenge. What are we going to do to try and solve it together? And it's thinking about really simple things like, how can we reduce our plastics as much as possible? Our client, The Collective, who make yogurt, they are a really great example in this area, who I always point to. They have done great things to kind of reduce the amount of plastics in their packaging, getting rid of lids, getting rid of spoons, getting rid of things like that they realized were really unnecessary. And again, the cool thing about this is that, number one, you're reducing the plastic, which is great from an environmental point of view, but also you're saving money because you're buying less packaging. And so again, isn't that great? It's a win-win. There's also thinking about things, to the innovation point. Our other client, Minor Figures, they've developed a product which is atomized oat milk, which means that instead of, the standard oat milk in a package, which is going to be heavier and require more packaging for less amount of product, can be sold in an atomized format where you add water yourself, and it's just much less packaging is needed for a larger amount of product equivalent. It's also better from a carbon point of view of how you ship it, etc., etc. So just thinking a little bit outside of the box. Finisterre as well, different industry, but another great client of ours who developed something called the Leave No Trace bag, which literally, if you put it in warm water, it disintegrates back into the water in a way that is not harmful, doesn't have microplastics in it, and they package all of their clothes that they ship out in that. So there are solutions out there, and they're pretty cool and don't have to involve more money or selling less products. We then move on to regenerative agriculture, which, as I said before, is just such an exciting opportunity. I think this is, again, another true win-win scenario. So regenerative agriculture is a massive opportunity to reduce the amount of carbon from obviously what we know to be a very carbon intensive industry, which is farming. And it can be a 4 times more powerful carbon sink than conventional farming. It's not only, again, from a carbon point of view, but we've got 33% more insect diversity, 25% more microbes in studies done on farms using regenerative agriculture methods. Also, again, it can be more profitable. So actually, after 6 years, the study found that the regenerative agriculture methods were up to 60% more profitable than other farming methods. That is because you're getting you're having higher quality products that you are growing or raising or rearing, which you can charge more for. You're also have more secure yields, and you're spending less on pesticides and things like that. So it's a really exciting area. And again, this is something that, requires some effort. It requires engaging with your supply chain and getting to kind of the root of your supply chain, speaking with the farmers. And there's different routes you can take to doing that. You don't have to do it kind of directly jump into that. You can work through remediaries, etc. Our lovely client Innocent actually have a farmer innovation fund, which they launched in 2021, which helps farmers to kind of through that transitional period of moving towards regenerative farming practices. I'm sure they'd be happy to share some insights on that if you'd like to learn more. Then we have food waste. So this is a huge problem. There's £5 billion, which is the annual cost to businesses in the hospitality and food service industry. that is literally going in the bin. Like, again, what a silly what a silly behavior for us to have, apart from the environmental damage that this is doing. That is a massive cost to businesses. And it's also very tragic because actually almost 70% of the food that was wasted could have been eaten. That equates to 15 billion meals. If we think about all the people out there who are struggling to feed themselves and their families, who are struggling to pay for food, etc., how awful, right? That this system is so broken. So there's lots of things that can be done around this, from managing, throughout the production process, through managing the portion sizes, through food date labeling, through working with, through just better stock management, also working with partners to help redistribute food waste, etc. So there's plenty that can be done there. And like I said, we're going to hear from our panelists a bit more on this in a second. And then influencing consumers. So as I said before, food and drink industry, you are in people's homes, they're trusting you, they're coming to you, you have a great platform and opportunity to influence the way that they behave. A huge amount of food waste is from the UK's households, but not only that, the impact of cooking. So consumers are actually actively seeking out energy saving products for their kitchens, energy saving tips. It is expensive, to use the energy that's needed to cook at home. And you have an opportunity to kind of influence them on how they kind of cook using less energy, but also food storage and batch cooking and things like that to make things last longer. And this helps out with not only the food waste issue, but also, how consumers can save cost during the cost of living crisis. Jamie Oliver Group, who we'll hear from in a bit, they've launched an air fryer campaign, which helped to kind of educate people and reduce cost of cooking, etc. Our other client, Pukka, have a smart boiling kettle campaign, because they found that actually almost half of the impact from their value chain came from boiling kettles when making tea. So used the opportunity to kind of influence the way that consumers behave in that way as well. So it's really about thinking, what is it that our consumers care about? What's the impact that we are either directly or indirectly contributing to, and how can we influence a better way of doing things? So just before we hand over and get into some panel discussions and hear from people in the industry themselves, I think just a few kind of tips to leave you with, because these are pretty big topics, food waste, regenerative agriculture. There's a lot to consider here, and it can be quite daunting to think about, okay, but what does this mean in reality? Where do I start from? Our recommendations on kind of how to get started on this are, first of all, ideally to do a double materiality assessment. This is also a requirement for the CSRD. So if you're an organization that's going to need to be adhering to CSRD requirements, you're going to need to do this anyway, or if you're, or it'll prepare you for the future. But essentially, double materiality looks at both the financial materiality risks, so things like disruption to supply chain that we were talking about, reputational risks of negative publicity, things like that, market risks, of changes in demand and competition. It then takes those financial risks, and then you compare those to your impact materiality risks, which is understanding what are the impacts that your business is having on the environment. What are your consumers and other stakeholders care about? What do they want to see you driving impact in? And you use the results of that to really understand what is it that is the most important to us to take action on from a point of view of risk and opportunity, and where we have a kind of obligation to take action. And that can help, because it is hard to know where to start. It's hard to know what to prioritize when we could be doing so much, but of course we have a finite amount of resource and time to be doing these things. So that helps you to kind of identify where are the key areas that we should be focusing on and taking action on. The next step then is to kind of use the results of that materiality assessment combined with the B Corp framework, which if you know anything about Seismic, you'll know that we are big advocates for, and we believe is the best framework out there to kind of help to give you practical instruction on what are actions that you can take as a business to improve. So kind of taking those two elements and combining them to inform your overall strategy in regards to sustainability and ESG. And then really the next thing is to engage with your supply chain. This is not a problem that any one business can solve on their own. All of us are reliant on our partners in our value chain, up and downstream in our value chain, from our customers to our suppliers and everything kind of in between. So really building those relationships so that you can influence change both ways is going to be vital. And then just thinking about the power of your communications, whether that be the risk associated with the power of your communications or the opportunity of how you can influence change. And I think all of these things coming at it with an attitude of kind of innovation and what's possible is going to mean that you have a great amount of opportunity to have this kind of win-win scenario where you're not only driving a better type of impact, but you're flourishing more as a business as well. So without further ado, I will please invite our panelists to join us. Hang on. Okay, we are very lucky to be joined by three superstars from the food and drink industry. First of all, we have a wonderful Gordon Kerr, who is the founder at Blacklock. Blacklock is a B Corp certified restaurant group based in London and Manchester. Gordon founded the business 10 years ago, and since then there have grown to be 6 restaurants in the group who serve honestly some of the most delicious and responsibly sourced meat in the country. If you haven't been there, I highly recommend that you add it to your list. Even if you don't eat meat, the sides are insane. So definitely go and visit it. They've been certified since August 2023 as a B Corp and have a pretty impressive score. We are then joined by Charlotte Jost, who is the head of impact and sustainability at Lily's Kitchen. Lily's Kitchen is a pet food brand. They only use 100% freshly prepared meat and vibrant fruits and vegetables in their recipes. They have been certified as a B Corp since 2015. They were actually one of the UK's founding B Corps and my first ever client personally, so they hold a special place in my heart. Charlotte has been at Lily's for just over 5 months, and she moved across from the sustainability team at Ella's Kitchen, another superstar certified B Corp in the food and drink industry. So Charlotte has a great amount of knowledge and insight to be able to bring to us today. And finally, Rosanna Blewett, who is the food education manager at the Jamie Oliver Group. So another certified B Corp. Jamie Oliver Group is on a mission to create a healthier, happier world through the joy of food. And they have a massive amount of impact in this area. I don't think we all realize how much they actually do on this topic. But Rosanna does. She's worked there for over 10 years and is a driving force behind Jamie's food education programs. She has developed, delivered, and expanded Jamie's Ministry of Food programs to schools, communities, and workplaces across the UK, Australia, and the USA. So huge amounts of impact there. Are we able to turn on our cameras, panelists? Lovely. Hi, Rosanna. So I'm going to jump in and ask you, Gordon, a bit around B Corp. So as I said, you guys have been certified for a while, and it would be great to understand a bit around what role B Corp certification has played in Blacklock's overall sustainability journey, and any advice that you might give to other food and drink companies or restaurants who are thinking about going on the certification journey.
Hello everybody. Can't see you, but it sounds like you might be able to see me. But I think B Corp has played a huge role and continues to play a huge role in our sustainability journey. Stepping back, we initially went for B Corp because it really spoke to us, and we were already running the company in that way, putting our people first, looking after our supply chain, and really having a key eye on our impact in the world. So we didn't really need to change our North Star through the process, but crucially, B Corp provided another layer of external accountability, so positively challenging, and also a benchmark, I guess, for where to start and what good looks like, because often it's hard to know where to start in that field. There's so much you could do. So we found that really positive, really supportive. And now that we've certified, I think our big takeaway through the process has been that B Corp is always about looking for improvement. So we try and harness that now through our journey as a positive, always applying kind of the B Corp lens to decisions that we might be making. How would B Corp, how should we run this decision through the B Corp lens to make sure that we get to the right process moving forward. So a big part of our journey. I think for restaurants, it can often I'm told it feels quite daunting, and it was daunting to us at the beginning. I think the biggest piece of advice I could give would be to engage the team early. It's a big change piece. So however you're running the company already, probably for 99% of the people, it's going to be a very new thing. So needing to engage the team early, we found was really key. Not least because restaurants are quite big organizations, lots of people in a restaurant, but perhaps not so many people centrally to run a project like B Corp. So engaging the team early meant that we had their buy-in. They were able to help delivery on the ground, and just sort of build the momentum of the whole project throughout the life of it. So engage the team early would be my advice.
Definitely good advice. And yeah, from a practical point of view of their input, and from the kind of cultural point of view of getting them engaged and excited, we find that's one of the best things to do from early doors. So thank you for that. I think your point around thinking like, well, what's right, what would resonate well with our B Corp principles is quite a good kind of guiding tool. Lovely. I'm going to move on and ask Rosanna a question. Rosanna, as I mentioned in the intro, the Jamie Oliver Group has a very long-standing commitment to social impact. It's kind of, it's been part of who the company is from the beginning. And particularly through your work with kind of food education and healthy eating habits. Can you just share a bit for the audience, some insights into the Ministry of Food, what it is, how it empowers individuals and communities to make better and more positive food choices?
Yes, absolutely. So, Jamie's a very well-known figure, and he personally and as a business, we're hugely passionate about social impact, sustainability, but child health is really our kind of key driver of everything that we do. So we really focus on that, especially in our food education work. I think Jamie's very well known for his campaigning work, his lobbying, influencing policy from the top. But what people know less about is our hands-on food education programs across the UK and beyond through Ministry of Food, as you say. So through Ministry of Food, we work in both schools through our Jamie Oliver 10 Skills programme and communities through our Ministry of Food community programme. And we essentially support local organisations, schools, to teach basic cooking skills, empowering local people to provide affordable, nutritious meals for themselves and their families. As I mentioned, we don't do that on our own. We work with fantastic partners, local authorities, charities, schools. We have a Royal Society of Public Health accredited training program, which we take all of our partners through to really ensure that they have all the skills to be able to deliver really our evidence-based programs. We've taught over 200,000 adults and children to cook now through the program, like really hands-on cooking, and we're able to reach some incredible target groups, young people, of course, but families, young carers, those recovering from addiction, those suffering with their mental health, and those areas of deprivation where skills are really and support is really needed around food. We've had lots of independent research done both here and in Australia as well, showing that the programs really work. So those who take part improve their food literacy, their cooking confidence, their cooking frequency at home. They decrease snacks, decrease takeaways. So we see huge benefits from the programs, both in schools and communities. And it's something that we're really proud of that we do at Jamie Oliver. We've set ourselves a goal of teaching 1 million people to cook by 2030. So that's the current ambition that we're working towards at the moment.
Love that ambition. It's It's a really inspiring one. And I think, you know, to your point, it's just obviously you're helping people's physical health, but also their lives in general are so much more enriched having this knowledge and these skills. So well done. Honestly, you guys are very inspiring. So, Gordon, I wanted to come to you, maybe a bit of a, just let's address the elephant in the room or the cow in the room, which is that obviously beef, you guys are a steakhouse, like beef is a big part of what you do, your identity, who you are. But obviously, we know that it's also a very significant contributor to global climate emissions. So can you talk a bit about how you address this and kind of make peace with this at Blacklock, and how you're working with suppliers and like leaning into regenerative agriculture and some of the solutions?
Yeah, sure. So I think first of all, probably say that there's good sources of meat and bad sources of meat, and the bad sources of meat that you're referring to there, where things, I think in your slideshow as well, Amy, like, you know, intensively farmed beef with high intervention, where the animal doesn't really live a life. That's actually not happening largely in the UK. It's happening in other parts of the world, and that does have a big impact on the emissions that you talked about. There's obviously then good sources of meat, which is where we source all our meat from, where the animals are outside living a very happy life, and it's, you know, incredibly sustainably sourced. And as you mentioned, regenerative agriculture, everything is farmed in a regenerative way, where actually, you know, we believe that the meat is climate positive, such that the whole ecosystem is working in tandem. And if you took one element out of it, it would have an impact on the wider chain, be it biodiversity, you know, the impact on the soil. So the meat that we buy is highly, very, very, very sustainable. And I think there's another side of it, though, is also not just where it's come from, but how you buy it. So an animal is reared, a cow is reared, and there's loads of parts, different parts of the animal. Often a steakhouse might sell, say, 3 or 4 different cuts of steak. There's then a whole other side of the animal that, you know, they're not buying, which is quite wasteful, or at least requires the farmer to find another avenue for that product. So we try and do it a little bit differently. We buy the whole animal. We try and make something of everything. That means that our farmer can actually farm less intensively. It means that the quality is higher to us, and there's much less waste throughout the whole chain. So it's kind of, I think it's two-phase. One is where are you buying it from, but buy the best, and then also how do you buy it? So rather than sort of cherry picking specific bits, you know, embrace the whole animal because it's a beautiful animal, and make something of everything, and that goes to, yeah, quality, intensity, and waste.
Thank you, Gordon. And I think you guys are, you know, one of the best examples that we've seen of companies who do that and really do kind of use the whole animal. To that point, maybe we move on to the topic of food waste. I know that each of your organizations are doing a lot to kind of tackle food waste. Rosanna, maybe do you want to jump in and talk a bit about how you address this at Jamie Oliver Group?
Sorry, just finding all those mute buttons. Yeah, so food waste is obviously an area that we've been doing a lot of work in recently. And we're kind of, like all of our social impact work, trying to really put it at the heart of the business, part of the DNA, so it fits naturally rather than just something that we're doing kind of on the side. Oh, let's just save a little bit of food waste. So whenever you see Jamie on TV, in his books, on social media, through our websites, there's always content flowing through all those different channels around food waste. And that's a really kind of purposeful step that we've made to ensure that we are kind of talking about food waste, educating, you know, we're talking about influencing our consumers. Jamie, you know, has huge influence over his consumers, but keeping it organic, conversational, not telling people what to do, but giving them really useful tips and tricks that they can use within their households. We have lots of other initiatives that are done kind of in-house through the restaurants. At our HQ, lunch is always made to order. On Fridays, the chefs use all of the leftovers from the week or the shoots to create lunch for the staff. And similarly, in restaurants, they use a lot of any kind of leftover or waste products to then make other things. We've recently done a big, what we call a Forward Friday event. So these are kind of sessions which we have across the business every quarter around a topic that we're really kind of want to discuss, bring up with the teams, creatively problem solve all together. So all parts of the business, whether you work in accounts or social impact or TV, come together to problem solve a topic. And we in September, we focused on what an epic food waste campaign would look like. So that was amazing. And we really hope that in the next year, we're going to run a big external food waste campaign, which will be really, really nice. We're also doing an internal food waste audit that's coming up as well. So just really keeping on top of what we're doing using RAP's Guardians of Grub framework. So that's going to be brilliant. And from a food education perspective, food waste is kind of, again, woven through all of our resources for schools. We also run a really comprehensive program in partnership with the King's Foundation, which focuses on food waste, specifically regenerative agriculture. And so, yeah, it's really part of every part of the business. We're trying to do little bits around food waste to improve all the time.
Thank you. And Charlotte, hi, I think we can hear you now. Can we hear you?
Hello.
Hello, fantastic.
Hi.
Hi. So Lily's has, is doing some great things around food waste as well, kind of at various ends of the value chain. Would you like to tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, of course. Sorry, it wouldn't be natural without a few tech issues in the morning. But yes, nice to see you all. So there's a few areas that we focus on when it comes to food waste. So the first one is the fact that we use animal byproducts in our Lily's Kitchen products. So rather than meat that goes kind of through the human food chain, we use that waste product. So once it's been through that journey and effectively comes to the end of its life, a lot of that meat is used for pet food. So we're effectively using a product that would have gone to waste otherwise. The other thing is donating our surplus stock. So we've set up a partnership with FareShare this year to try and donate as much stock as we possibly can. And we looked at different areas in the UK that have a higher demand for pet food. So we've identified kind of a few key sites with FareShare to understand where those demands are for pet food and make sure that we're trying to send as much stock of ours as possible to those areas so that we know it will get used. The other thing is, if anyone hasn't used it yet, I would really recommend using RAP, the website. So RAP is an NGO, so a non-governmental organisation, and they try and tackle waste in all different areas. So whether it's food waste, textile waste, etc. So I would really recommend, if anyone hasn't used it, going onto their website, and they've got lots of advice and tools and targets that you can do when it comes to waste, and particularly food waste. So that's a really good one to look at.
Thanks, Charlotte. Yeah, great tip. I know it's a very useful website. And Gordon, I know from a meat point of view and from like using even your fruit and veg and that kind of thing, you guys do a lot. If you maybe wanted to share a little about that.
Yeah, I mean, we see it two-pronged. First of all, for sustainability, also the commercial aspect of it. So we absolutely hate waste. So we're trying to always work out where there is waste, and sometimes it's you can't eliminate the waste fully. How can we use that? So we have various dishes on the menu, both on the food and drink side, that use kind of offcuts from trimming of butchery to create potted meat starters, or more recently we actually just created a 100% waste beef rib dish that, long story short, was some product was going in the bin at our farmer, that we've managed to turn into a product, which was really nice and engaged the whole team actually brilliantly. Pip to peel in the bar. So when you peel an orange and kind of to make an old-fashioned cocktail, and then there's leftover peel, and how do we make cellos and all that sort of stuff. So really trying to find a life for the whole product at all different parts, and also challenging ourselves on doing more and more of that from both the sustainability and the commercial side of it.
Yeah, very cool. And exactly, yeah, it's a win-win, and also like forces innovation and makes delicious products that you wouldn't have maybe found as much before. So even it's a triple win. On that commercial point of view, I think it's important to think about all the different factors in an organization. And Charlotte, I wanted to ask, Lily's was acquired by Nestle Purina in 2020. So, we said before, they certified as B Corp in 2015, and then were acquired as a B Corp. How did being a B Corp kind of influence this process of becoming a wholly owned subsidiary by a very large organization? And how has also, opposite to that, how has being part of a large group kind of influenced your B Corp certification and your sustainability work in general?
Yeah, sure. So being a B Corp is very much ingrained into our DNA, into our everyday lives. As Amy mentioned, we were certified since 2015. So it's a big part of who we are. And it's kind of, it's been that guidance of how we operate for a long, long time. So when we were acquired, it was very much built into those conversations to set those guardrails, to say, we are a B Corp, it's part of who we are. And so this is what needs to happen for us to remain a B Corp. So a part of that is really being clear on the complete and distinct guidelines. So I guess if anyone is on the call and from a B Corp who is owned by larger parent companies, you're probably going to be really familiar with them. But B-Lab effectively set out some guidelines called complete and distinct, which are exactly for this situation where smaller brands are being kind of transitioning into larger parent companies, to say kind of, to keep your B Corp status, these are the areas that you need to really remain distinct in, and kind of remain ownership, or kind of keep your ownership on, in order to get that certification. So things like your finances, things like control over your products. So that was very much built into those conversations and those documents when we were bought, and that's still very much a live conversation that we have on a regular basis. So whenever we're talking about different areas of the business, we always come back to complete and distinct, make sure that we remind ourselves where those boundaries lie, and that we keep to them, so that we can keep the certification, keep the certification for as long as we can, forever.
Yeah, great. And I think it's helpful to understand as well, just like the value that being a B Corp presented to Nestle Purina, that they are prioritizing keeping you a B Corp and having that be something that stays a key part of who you are.
Definitely.
Wonderful.
And interestingly, I was just going to say, Nestle now interestingly have 7 B Corps within their portfolio of brands. So we're now starting to really collaborate with those other brands to understand their B Corp journey, and how we remain complete and distinct, as well as things like the new standards, and just make sure that we work together, and understanding those guardrails. So yeah.
Brilliant. Well, unfortunately, I think that's all we have time for today. I will hand over to Olivia to wrap things up.
Thank you very much, Amy. Yes, time has flown. Thank you all for sharing your insights this morning. And I want to say an extra special thank you to the audience as well for all your brilliant questions. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to get to all of them, but we've collected them. And I know you want info on the sources of data we shared. You've got some follow-up questions for the guests, so we'll do our best to answer those and send them to you in the follow-up, as well as with the recording. So thank you for your engagement, and I hope you will have a wonderful rest of the day. Take care, everybody.
Thanks all. Bye.
Bye.